Welcome to the both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. Great introduction.
Yeah, I love being called Maya's real life father. I'm like, this is the real life version of me. It implies that there's a fake life version of me, but I like it.
I think it implies that there's a film version. There's like, there's a film version of the.
Yeah.
I really don't think I've had a lot of film fathers. So as I track through my acting experience, I think Chris Messina was, I think, my father in one scene, in one movie, and Liev Schreiber was my father in another scene. But I think that's it. So not a lot of imaginary fathers. Whereas, Dad, have you had a lot of imaginary daughters?
I don't know. None that left us big, none that make the impression that you do.
Oh, well, Liev made a pretty big impression on me, I have to say. So
don't say that. I'll go into a dark mood.
Do you need me to leave? Because I can give you a little bit of time. I can give you a little bit of time to talk to one another. Congratulations on the film. I really loved it. Maya, I want to start with you. My understanding is that you were studying Flannery O'Connor in high school, and you sort of fell in love with her work in that moment. I wonder if you can recall or paint me a picture of what that day was like when you were studying Flannery O'Connor and how you felt when you started hearing and studying her work.
I don't know. I think I was really struck by this idea that the biggest thing standing between you and your full potential is an overwhelming desire to reach it, rather than just an investigation of what interests you, and a curiosity and a generosity. It was very clear to me that the smartest people I knew were the people who asked the most questions, not the people who just kept talking and didn't listen to anyone around them. And as a young person, I don't know, I felt at war with that. I knew I wanted to do so much in my life, and I wanted to be great, and I wanted like people to love my poetry and listen to my songs, and I wanted a lot of attention, but I also knew that desire for attention was the thing that was kind of preventing me from doing deep work. And so I don't know. I'd be curious to turn over the question. Dad, do you have you maybe remember me better at that time than I do? Do you have any idea?
I think you actually just said it really well. You had a healthy suspicion of your desire to be fabulous. A lot of us who feel drawn to the arts world. I mean, you see it a lot in Salinger, J.D. Salinger is always taking to task the people who want to make a big splash. What do you want to make a big splash for? For your own self-aggrandizement? For other people to think you're fabulous? It's a very obvious, shallow goal. And I think Flannery was really struggling with one part of her brain that she didn't want to be a writer. She wanted to be Tolstoy. She wanted to humiliate Margaret Mitchell. She wanted, she had grand ambitions. And this other part of her that was extremely gentle and understood that humility was the key to the universe, and understanding community and your place. And I think her desire to be a good Christian, that voice was very loud, and the ambitious voice was loud. And I think that you related to that because you had a lot you wanted to say, and you were naturally suspicious of it. And I think that women in general are often told that ambition is kind of ugly, whereas young men are not told that as loudly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that angered you. But there was a great tension in you at that age about this conversation. And when a young person is struggling and they're smart enough to have all these questions, but not patient enough to breathe and let these questions sit, and then the mind starts doing somersaults.
And I will say that even though I in no way, because your question I think touches on this, I in no way had a relationship to the weight of God as a judging figure in my life, or a God that had any kind of visage or particular look or denomination.
Yeah.
But I did have a relationship to values. So I didn't have Flannery's God baggage, but I had my own gods, as we all do.
In the words of Hank Williams, let me stay with God for a moment here. Ethan, I know when you were, I find it interesting that your mom gave you Flannery O'Connor's work growing up, because I read a great quote from you that when you were growing up, you had this deep interest in God and in faith. And as you got older, into your teens, like often does, that started to dissipate, and into your 20s, it starts to dissipate and starts to go away. But I know you've sort of been reckoning with it right now, and sort of reconsidering that relationship with God and faith. Does making a movie about Flannery O'Connor, who had this tension between her Catholicism and her art, does that make you revisit that even more so in your own life? Light Questions with Tom Power. This is the name of the show, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Light Questions. Light Questions with TP.
Well, Tom, I really enjoy wearing Prada when I think about my first reaction to that question is one of the things that you don't anticipate about getting older is the great benefits of having powerful young people in your life that force you, they readjust your equilibrium. And Maya's youth forced me to revisit my youth when she was 20 and asking all Flannery, in a lot of ways, the Prayer Journal started a series of dominoes that started going off in her brain of asking more substantive questions than she was before. And it brought it up in me. And I think one of the great joys of the life of the arts is you get to kind of choose your work setting. And likewise, when you choose a subject matter like Flannery O'Connor, it does push you. It pushes you reading her writing, reading the people that she read, having to sit in a rehearsal room and talk with Maya and Laura and the cinematographer about what Miss O'Connor meant. There's crazy stories. This guy crashing a tractor into a tree like he's Moses and getting the tattoo of Jesus on his back only to be beaten by his religious wife. I mean, her stories make you, like what Maya just said, they make you ask questions.
I think it's important at this point to sort of take the apotheosis out of Flannery a little bit and sort of talk about her as a human, which, I mean, as a fan of Flannery O'Connor, there came that moment that comes for a lot of fans of Flannery O'Connor, where you read the books, you're so moved by A Good Man Is Hard to Find, and you get moved by the pieces. Then you inevitably find out about the letters she wrote, and you start learning about her sort of individual correspondences. And, there's been a reckoning around race and racism in her writing and her personal correspondences for some time. And Ethan, I know you and Maya had conversations. I read about you having conversations about whether you should make this film at all. What I'm curious about, what were those questions you were asking yourselves in a moment like that?
You can't look at the history of America at all without stumbling on her great sins and wounds and crimes. And I started to feel about Flannery the way I feel about America, which is that it's a racist country. That's what she was a racist in recovery. She saw it more insightfully than most any people of her time. She was raised and fed and watered in the Jim Crow South, which is a diseased place to grow up. And Alice Walker said about her that there was not a whiff of magnolia in the air. And that's why she loved it, because it was honest. She didn't write about what it was like to be oppressed. She wrote about what it was like to be a racist white woman, and she wrote about it very beautifully, if that's possible. And I know there's some people that would believe that this person should not be talked about in this way, but I feel like whenever we're having the conversation, we're winning. And that whenever we're looking about it and talking about it, I went through this really interesting experience. I did a show called The Good Lord Bird.
Yeah, I remember.
About John Brown, which dives really deeply into America's crimes. And one of the things that James McBride, who's one of America's greatest novelists, I believe, said to me when we were doing that show was be careful. Every time you cast a racist character in this, I really want you to cast someone you love, somebody you respect, because when he sees racists in movies and they always have horns on their head, you're subtly telling people racism isn't real because human beings don't have horns. And that systemic racism is perpetuated by good people being ignorant and inexperienced and uneducated. And that this conversation has value. You don't have to like Flannery O'Connor. You don't have to forgive her for some of the things she said in a couple of her letters. You don't have to. You don't have to read her work. If it offends you, I'm trying to reconcile where, Flannery's much better than my grandmother, and so how do we make sense out of our collective past? And I think that white guilt is a formidable enemy. People like to kind of mock white guilt, but guilt turns into fear, which turns into anger. And guilt is something that has to have light shed on it, and you have to be held accountable before you can get to forgiveness. And so we just tried to look at this like scientists. I'm interested in America's history. Alice Walker has another great line. She says, "Be careful when you throw away your geniuses. You do so at your own peril. They have things to teach us. And just because we don't have to agree with them." Maya said this thing to me early on that I really loved, and forgive me for putting words in your mouth, Maya, but she grew up with me showing her Gene Hackman performances and Denzel Washington performances and Al Pacino performances and Robert De Niro performances, where they're never asked to play good people. They can play racist, they can play, but they're men obsessed with themselves and their work and their power, and we can find them funny and dangerous and sexy, whereas young women are always asked to be nice and likable. And she really, when she presented me with the idea of making a movie about Flannery, she really wanted to play a character, warts and thorns and all, because, and I thought that would have value. And I think even somebody who disagrees with my point on this, I think that disagreement has value. And so for Maya and I to say, we're not going to make this movie because we're scared to have this conversation.
Yeah.
That's where I kind of came. That's where I fell on it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your perspective there, Maya. I want to bring you in here, not just to talk about the conversations, because I think that's important, but your dad brings up an interesting point. Not only, also Flannery O'Connor, relatively unknowable character. There's not a lot of footage of her. We don't know a lot about her. We don't know a lot about her dynamics. We don't know a lot about her internal life. Again, light questions with Tom Power. Can you talk a little bit about what the conversations you and your dad were having there about reckoning with Flannery O'Connor's, as your dad put it, recovering racism, and also knowing that you had to embody this person, warts and all as well, and racism and all as well?
The way that I pursued playing her character was an attempt at trying to emulate her style of writing, which was warts and all, and not trying to tidy up reality. I tried to make her unpleasant to be around. I tried to make her sharp and pointy, and I tried not to smile too much, and I tried to have the discomfort that I felt in all of her writing, her letters, her stories, reverberate through her body. It was physical discomfort, it was emotional discomfort, it was loneliness, and playing this character. I was living in a house with my dad and my stepmom, and tons of our friends came to be in this film and support our making it. And it was one of the loneliest times in my life, because even if you're not like a quote unquote method actor, or anytime you play a character, they seep into your skin. My joke is I'm not allowed to shop and buy any clothing while I'm playing a character, because I'll inevitably buy clothing I'll never wear again in my life. Like I'll shop for the character unbeknownst to myself. When I was playing Joe in Little Women, I bought all these long skirts and corsets and things, and then they sit in my closet, and I haven't pulled them out once. And
It
so
is hard to find the occasion to wear a bonnet, Maya. I'm with you. It's hard. It's just hard to find the right restaurant that'll take you in the bonnet.
It's
you know,
difficult.
I get it.
You look silly, even if in your home in the mirror you think you look good. You go out in the world and you look silly. And so anyway, she seeped into my skin, and I tried not to tidy her up. I tried not to tidy up reality. You know, whether or not I did is a conversation I hope other people have, but I tried not to.
Well, that even just that you said at the end, I tried to X, and whether or not that I did is Y, is the last thing I wanted to talk about. So there's this clip, Ethan, of you. I don't know if you're aware of this because you don't strike me as an ultra online dude, but there's this clip of you kind of going viral for this talk you gave around acting at Lincoln Center. I don't know if you're aware of that. And it's been shared in a lot of sort of artistic, artistic communities. It's been sent to me a bunch of times about the idea of doing your job and trying to reject the idea of validation. I want to play a little bit of this moment from it that I thought was salient to the conversation.
I'm in service of this art form, do or die, whether I get a job or whether I don't get a job. What I tell my daughter is like, if she wants to go into acting, she is an actor. She's very good. But if teaching acting at a high school in Seattle when you're 62, if that doesn't sound great, then get out. Get the fuck out.
That's a little bit of Ethan Hawke's pep talk. Maya, do you remember that conversation?
Completely. I remember it very distinctly because the time I think it was most poignant to me in two different moments in my life, big decision-making moments. The first one was whether or not to go to conservatory or to attend a more traditional liberal arts college. I wanted to go to conservatory and trying to figure out whether or not that was an acceptable life choice for me. And the other one was whether or not to leave conservatory to start working professionally or whether or not to stay. And we had a lot of these conversations trying to, and this loops back a little bit nicely to where we started in this conversation, figure out what the voices in your head that you were hearing were. So we talked a lot about this, and I remember saying, and you saying to me, I did want to be a teacher. And that the person who'd inspired the actors who had inspired me the most to want to be an actor were my high school acting teacher, Laura Barnett, my Shakespeare teacher, Nancy Fells Garrett, and my teacher in drama school, Richard Feldman. I loved them. And they were who I wanted to be and resemble, and the kind of scene partners I wanted to be. And I think, and it was when I was talking like that my dad was like, you can do whatever you want. If you want to leave, leave. If you want to stay, stay. Your heart is in the right place. And so I think you're good to make whatever decision you want to do. And that was really impactful for me and a really important moment. Does that sound right, Dad?
Exactly right.
That's a powerful thing, you think, because I'm sure that knowledge that we just heard is hard learned to be able to pass on.
Well, it is hard learned. I have multiple friends that are dead. This is our life. And people were very quick to make everything superficial and make everything tell you that if you're making money, that you're winning. And it's just not true. In the history of mankind, over and over again, you see that the people that society sees as losing are winning, and the people that are winning are losing. You have to have your own metric for how you're doing and how your development is. This country puts a tremendous amount of effort into trying to help young people reach the age of 35, how to get a career, get married, have a baby, figure out who you are. Well, what are you supposed to do once you're 40? What are you supposed to do once you realize that money really isn't going to make you happy? How do you manifest yourself as a good member of the community and follow your dreams? I think these conversations, whether you're 25 and Maya or whether you're 53 and me, these conversations are really valuable because what the world tells us is successful is not always successful.
Well,
I also think
sorry,
that
Maya,
what,
please.
oh,
Go ahead.
sorry,
No,
just
go
really
ahead.
quickly, I think that another important thing is differentiating what are your dreams and what are the dreams that society has placed on you, right? Like, and you figure that out slowly. Do you value beauty, or have a lot of people talk to you about how you look? Like, or do you value marriage, or has every movie you've ever seen ended in a wedding? And one thing I loved about Flannery is that she didn't put any emphasis on romantic relationships in her life. She occasionally had some real moments of disappointment that we do have in the movie that wasn't a path that she could explore. But even that disappointment didn't become the center of her development or her life. That was one of the really exciting things about playing this part that we didn't talk about, was that it is a story that's not about that's about a woman. It's not about a woman falling in love. It's about a woman's dedication to her work. That is such a rare story to hear. And even today, it's still difficult to figure out what is important to you and what makes your friends go, oh, you're doing so well. Oh, yeah, Maya's in a great relationship. She's doing so well. Oh, Maya's made a lot of money. She's doing so well. Are those indications to me that I am doing well or not? And every individual gets to make those decisions for themselves. But very few individuals actually ever have the opportunity in their life to make them freely. And to uncloud their mind from the external voices. And that, I think that's a really good goal.
It leads me to what I wanted to say at the end of this conversation, which is that I went in expecting a film about an author who I love. Like, I love Flannery O'Connor. I was looking forward to seeing some of the stories, and I knew there was going to be some dramatizations of the short stories in the novel. I was excited about that. But when I ended up seeing a film about why we do the things that we do and where our true validation should come from, I was overjoyed. I want to thank the both of you for making the time to talk to us today for another rousing episode of Light Questions with Tom Power. And I want to thank you both so much for your thoughtful answers and your perspective. Thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
So much, Tom. Yeah.
Special thanks to Conan O'Brien for bringing us together.
If it wasn't for Conan O'Brien, I never would have read Flannery O'Connor. Conan, answer my emails. My guests were Ethan Hawke and Maya Hawke. Ethan directed and co-wrote the new film Wildcat. Maya stars as the late writer Flannery O'Connor.